Yes. Welcome. What's up? What is up? Back once again, it is the incredible In the Black podcast. And in case you weren't aware, this is a podcast dedicated to covering the current events and social issues going on in your Black world and covering it all from the perspective of three grown-ass men who are always looking to get into a little bit of good trouble. I am your host, Big O, Mr. In the Black himself, but you know I can never do this alone. I want to, before we do that, this is a special edition of the Black Light segment. Of course, you guys know the Black Light is our opportunity to dive into the people and conversations that deserved the deep dive. But before we get into all of that, let me introduce the rest of my co-hosts, man. Crush, what's up?
What's good, everybody?
No doubt. L.
Hey,
L is feeling flossy tonight. You see,
I know. Full announcements.
I know. L feeling extra flossy tonight. L, what's up, man?
Might be a hashtag tattoo somewhere.
Yeah. I'm chilling, man.
You got it tatted too. That's why you got that big ass joint. You got it tatted too, didn't you? You did, didn't you?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I need a new tattoo, but I haven't. No, I gotta get more guns. More guns first, man. More guns before a tattoo, bro.
My guy, don't even get me started, man. Don't even get me started.
Are there any guns left?
Not many. There ain't a whole lot of ammo out there.
No bullshit. Now, L, please help. Well, before we do that, also, if you're checking this out on YouTube, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. It goes a long way. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out on the next video. And of course, follow us across social media at In the Black PDCST, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, your mama's house, all of that stuff. You'll find us. But as well, before we jump into it, L, please tell these good folks how they can become part of the family if they want to become part of the family, man.
Hey, man, we want you to become a part of the family. That's first up. We like about 5 of y'all, so y'all can come on through, right on over and check out the intheblackpodcast.com website. And then up in the corner, you can see Become Family. Click that tab. There you can give us money so we can build a bigger platform, of course. Cash App, Venmo, EBT, CBT, QVS, TNT, ESPN, whatever you try to do. But also you can buy our swag, man. You can buy our t-shirts. You can buy our hoodies. We got new toilet paper that we just coming out with. You can use. It's real soft. It ain't that Scott's that you typically be wiping your ass with anything. Just come on through, man. Become a member of the family over here at In the Black Podcast.
No doubt. We even got the silk bonnets coming out real
soon. Got even the
silk
bonnets, man.
Silk bonnets? Not
silk
satin?
Bonnets.
No satin?
No.
The satin is a little bit more expensive.
No.
Our guest tonight, I'm really excited to have him on. He doesn't want me to call him Professor Rodriguez, but I'm going to do it. Professor Dylan Rodriguez, author of White Reconstruction, Domestic Warfare, and the Logics of Genocide. This is going to be very interesting, man. It's going to be an extremely interesting conversation.
So,
Professor Rodriguez, what's going on?
So you see my name.
It's the last time I'm going to call you.
Tell him, Dylan.
Call me by my name. I appreciate the gesture. You can call me by my name right there.
I got you. So we are very familiar with you, Dylan. But for our listeners, for our viewers, please tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Hold on, Dylan. Before you do that, man, I want to honor you by reading your bio, because in your bio shows your hard work and dedication. And I like giving people their fucking flowers while they're still on this side of the dirt.
No doubt.
Dylan Rodriguez is an abolitionist teacher, scholar, and activist. He was named to the inaugural class of Freedom Scholars in 2020 and is president of the American Studies Association 2020 to 21. He has worked as professor at University of California, Riverside since 2001 and recently served as the facility elected chair of the UCR Division of Academic Senate and chair of ethnic studies. Dylan's thinking, writing, teaching, scholarly activism, Activist labors addressed the complexity and normalized proliferation of historical regimens and logics of the anti-Blackness and racial colonial violence in everyday state, cultural, social formations. He conceptualized abolition and other forms of movement as part of the historical collective genius of rebellion, survival, abolition, and radical futurality. He is the author of 3 books, most recently, White Reconstruction, Domestic Warfare, and the Logic of Racial Genocide, Critical Ethnic Studies, A Reader, which is dope as shit, by the way. And he'll go and give all the places that he can find himself, man.
Yeah, no bullshit.
I just want to say that I first came across Dylan, man, listening to Beyond Prisons podcast.
Yes.
Man, they had him on there, and literally I was blown the fuck away by not just the intellect, but the passion, and just it was given in such a practical manner. I mean, one of the stats that he gave, I think I heard it there, was he was talking about campus police officers. And he's going to touch a little bit about cops off campus here in this conversation. But he was talking about here in Pennsylvania, the largest police force in Pennsylvania is Temple University's police force. A college campus. A college. So, Dylan, go ahead, man. I'm excited to jump in, man. Please.
I'm going to sign off now because everything's done.
You don't do that.
Oh, no, bro.
Already swollen enough as it is. You can never get this dude to shut up. Go ahead, Dylan.
You made me feel so
please.
good. It's all uphill from here. You made me feel so good. I'm ready to leave.
Oh, come on with me. Come with it, man. Come with it.
No, honestly, first of all, thank you for inviting me. Like I don't take anything for granted. I tell any community I'm working with, any organization I'm working with, any group of people, collective, whatever that I work with or that invite me just to be part of what they're doing, that I appreciate the invitation. I always appreciate being invited to the party. I've watched and listened to your all stuff. That's what this is. That's why I enjoy listening to and watching you all.
Hold on. You watch and listen to our stuff, and you actually came and decided to be. You know what? I feel some sort of way tonight. You done made
I feel honored
tonight, boy. You done made a brother happy tonight.
Yeah, I feel honored. I feel validated right now.
Mama, we done made it, no doubt. Go ahead, man.
No, look. So I appreciate the invitation to any party. This is one of the ones that when you all invited me, I was so happy, and I just hope I can live up to the billing, and if not, that's okay too, because I'll try again one day.
No doubt.
But I'm from the area. I don't know if you told everybody. I'm from the DMV. I grew up in Northern Virginia. My parents they were part of that post 1965 wave of migrations to the States. My dad was recruited to work for the World Bank, so he worked for imperialist global capital. I got a whole bunch of stories about him. I grew up in a Filipino kind of extended Filipino community, in part in the DMV, many of whom were expatriates from Marcos regime martial law. I remember being around titos and titas that had a price on, not a price on their head, but they had literal and figurative Marcos regime weaponry pointed at their head. They had to leave. They couldn't be there. My mom was a teacher and administrator in the public school system in Fairfax County for her entire career, and like I say all the time, when you grow up, your formative years in a place like Alexandria, it turns you into this. It turns you into what you see here. I tell people that don't know what Northern Virginia, what Alexandria are, that if they ever go there, it'll explain a lot about me, if not everything.
Say it one more time for the folks in the back, my guy.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of folks don't know, well, people might think that you're Latino, but you're Filipino, right? Do you think that upbringing, that cultural background helped to spawn your revolutionist attitude?
Absolutely, but possibly not in the way you would expect, right? Because part of, so Frantz Fanon writes about this, right? Frantz Fanon in Wretched of the Earth, he writes about how every generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. One of the most famous quotations from that book. And what always strikes me about what Fanon is saying there is the way people interpret it. People often interpret it to talk about how there's a revolutionary generation that just kind of sprouts up from the roots and discovers its mission and fulfills it. Right? I don't read it that way. I read it the way I think Fanon intended it, which is autobiographical. Because what I think Fanon's actually writing about is some version of class suicide. Because don't forget, right? Frantz Fanon was sent to a colonial site in Algeria where he was working for the French colonizers. And he flipped, right? And he became a global revolutionary, and that's why the CIA poisoned him and killed him. All right. So when he's writing about that, I feel like he's speaking to an entire generation of people who were, in a sense, invited, solicited to be part of the United, to come to the United States on the backs of the repression of Black liberation struggles, primarily, right? During the early stages of the domestic warfare that turned into the prison industrial complex and anti-Black policing, like writ large, right? Rendered large. It always had been anti-Black policing.
Yeah,
but it didn't emerge into the form that we see it now until this last half century or so. And so what I find about my own kind of autobiographical experience, my own upbringing, is that I'm part of this generation of so-called third world immigrants that was actually supposed to be assimilated.
Yeah.
Right. Like put it this way, I don't have any student debt. You know why? Because I don't know if they still do this, but at the time, my dad worked for the World Bank. The World Bank subsidized the tuition of the children of its employees like 80% or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So
they still do it. They just change the percentage.
See what I mean? So like none of the things I think and write and do were what I was supposed to be scripted to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, it's precisely that intimacy, the intimacy with this assimilationist, multiculturalist, white supremacist, colonial anti-Blackness, right? It's all the above in different degrees of intensity. It's all that. The intimacy with that is what pulls on you. And at a certain point, you kind of have to pick a fucking side.
Pick a side. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I know that sounds real simplistic, but sometimes it gets that way. Sometimes it crystallizes. Usually it's really complex, right? And there's like more than one side. You got to figure out what the gray area is and navigate all that, right? But there's also specific moments in your life and in history where it's really clear, right? Like which side of the historical narrative are you going to go in with?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you're going to be accountable to history, and I think all of us are. All of us
in some degree, sure.
Right. Yeah. It's a question of whether you own it or not, whether you acknowledge that or not. And so, but I think it's those moments when history is kind of leaning on you to decide what side you're going to be on, right? When it becomes crystal clear, and this George Floyd bill thing is one of these moments in a certain kind of way. It's crystal clear what the nature of the warfare that's happening is inducing in terms of asymmetrical casualties. Right. In terms of generally one-sided casualties, at that point, it's like you have an obligation to just make a decision. And you also have an obligation to build an analysis and spread that shit.
Yeah.
Anyway, I could go on, but anyway, that's my affinity to your all's program is in part because of the fact that I'm from the area. I'm from that general area.
Yeah, that's what's up. So let's talk about that George Floyd Act while we're here, because
well, first of all, it's fucked up. They named it after him.
That's number one. And not only that, but even with the case that is taking place against the officers who murdered him, of course, they're calling that the George Floyd murder trial. Yeah. But the act itself, Dylan, I see so many people cheering this act and being excited about this fucking act. And I'm reading it. I'm like, why are you so enthralled with simple reform, knowing that we've seen reform after reform after reform after reform after reform after motherfucking reform?
Have we? Question for you, man. Have we actually seen reform? We haven't really seen reform. We've seen that so many people have battled against reform for a long time. So, but go ahead, Dylan.
What was Crush about to say?
No, I was just saying. I see repression for that reform, but
So here's the thing: is we have to be clear in what we mean by the terms we use, right? And this is I think a moment where we need to be engaged in some form of collective study all the time, collective analysis all the time, so that we understand what a reform is.
Yeah.
Right. And whether a thing that we're pushing is the kind of reform we want to support. Because the truth of the matter is the police in their current and contemporary version are a reform. They're actually the product of not one reform, but multiple generations of reforms.
I can do
right?
it.
That's what the prison industrial complex is, right?
Yeah,
that's what the, part of the expansion of police power is fueled by generation upon generation of police reforms, right? And so on the other hand, if we take what it is that people's desires are, right? Their desire is, and I'm talking about people who are targeted by the cops. I'm about Black people. I'm talking about undocumented people, unhoused people, et cetera, right? The desire is for the shit to stop.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like at some level, it's casualty management. Right? How can we just limit the damage that this particular system is creating all the time, right? In ways that are actually reproducing our own self-destructive tendencies too. So part of it is casualty management, and then the other part is actually, I think it's really proto-abolitionist, if not actually abolitionist, meaning that what people want is for the violence, the state-inflicted asymmetrical warfare to fucking stop. Yeah. They want to abolish that violence, right? Yeah. And so the problem is in part an analytical and a cultural one, right? It's also a political one, which is that part of the genius of what the emergence over the last half century of think tanks, liberal foundations, philanthropic foundations. Certain entire streams of research in universities and academia writ large. The work that elected officials have done, all that stuff has created this elsewhere a lot. Me and a lot of other people call it now the nonprofit industrial complex. Right.
We're going to talk about that. Don't worry.
Right. So that whole complex works to kind of shape and engage in another kind of repression, and that is the repression of political imagination. So now the political imagination is such that the horizon of possibility is reform, right? And when we think about horizon, right? A horizon is a fucking it's in a way it's sort of an abstraction. You know what I mean? Like you look at a horizon,
it's unattainable.
It's something you imagine. I mean, think about the fact that the horizon of political action now, the horizon of political movement, many mass grassroots movements at the local level, at a global level, that the limit of the horizon of the imagination is some form of militant reform. What the fuck?
Yeah.
What is that, right? What is that? So we have to think really carefully, first of all, about where that came from, right? And then second of all, about how toxifying that is, because this is what happens now. This is what what we're talking about with the George Floyd bill is there's a kind of celebration of it as a possibility for what is actually just piecemeal state reform.
Yeah.
Right. And that's for a second. It's not going to fucking pass.
Yeah. Change around the margins all the time.
There's no way that thing's going to pass. But then third, even if you were to celebrate it passing somehow, right? All you have to do is look at the recent historical archive of police reforms at the local and regional level, and you'll see that all of these reforms have there's zero evidence that these kinds of police reform in any way reduce anti-Black, racist, gendered, anti-trans, Islamophobic police violence. None. And so we just need the language, we need the analysis, and we need to push the imagination of the people that we're with all the time so that we're not funneled into the bullshit, because that's what it is. And how dare they call it the George Floyd bill?
Okay, question for you. I mean, you said that you don't believe that the bill will pass, even with that $750 million that they're going to be pushing towards all of these local and state police departments. You don't think that it's going to pass? You don't think that enough middle of the road Democrats and Republicans are going to jump on top of this, even if it irks their guts to be able to do something in any type of police reform?
Here's the thing: is that entire centrist, body of elected officials. First of all, it includes a lot of district attorneys, right, and former district attorneys. Yeah. It also includes a lot of electoral accountability to police unions. So one thing we just do a basic power mapping of electoral politics.
Come on.
These police unions, man, like the police unions are no fucking joke. It's some mafia shit almost anyway. I mean, you're in Pennsylvania, you're Philadelphia. Like this is why Mumia Abu-Jamal is still locked
right
up.
now.
Yep.
That's the only reason Mumia Abu-Jamal is still locked up is because of the FOP and the police unions. That's it, right? So I mean, I don't make a living doing political prognosticating at all, right? So, but what I will say is this: even if the George Floyd bill were to pass, in a way, I would actually be more scared. Yes, I would
expound on that.
Well, number one, because like I said, there is zero empirical evidence to give us any serious, researched, rigorous confidence that the measures that are outlined in the Floyd bill, the so-called George Floyd bill, will curb the asymmetrical casualties of police warfare. Right? There's no evidence of that. Okay, that's number one. Right. Number two is I'm concerned about the giant victorious exhale that will happen among so many people who are otherwise poised to accelerate and enrich, Black radical, abolitionist, revolutionary, etc. forms of political and cultural work. Right. It's the celebration of these kind of fraudulent victories that, in a way, scares me more than when those things get repressed or when they get defeated.
Like Garden.
Yeah.
I mean, the bill was in a way not even about compromise, but about pacifying us.
I think that's probably a generous interpretation, right? I would say that's a generous interpretation. I think there's a way that the content of the bill actually it does two things. On the one hand, it stokes. We've got to stop calling it the far right, by the way. You know what I mean? How people have been using that term far right.
Yeah.
They're not the far right. They're not far.
They're right in Laurel.
They're right. They're with you. They're around you. And some of them actually kind of look like some of us.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so let's stop calling it the far right as if it's somewhere else way over there, right? Like we should know about this by now. We should have learned that lesson by now. But part of what this bill does, it stokes them. This whole thing about trying to reform the whole police qualified immunity kind of thing. Yeah. All the cops and all these folks, including so-called Democrats, all these people.
Yeah, right.
All they got to trot out is the notion that now cops are going to be afraid to do their job. Now it's going to be harder to recruit more cops. That is the language of domestic warfare, by the way.
Yep.
What people are actually saying in no uncertain terms is that it is going to be harder to wage domestic war against those criminalized communities over there if you pass this whole reform of qualified immunity.
And that actually leads into your book, White Reconstruction, because I think and I might be simplifying it too much.
You probably are.
Fuck you. The premise of the book essentially is how, based off of everything that we see taking place in so-called progress, was actually leading for more of a white supremacist expression. So we would see white reconstruction. So while I may fuck it up, I would rather you unpack it, because it seems like what you were leading to and explaining just now was very much what you have stated in your book.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything that original in the book. I think maybe I've tried to synthesize some things for sort of the first time, but the ideas I'm drawing from are pretty widespread. They're part of a kind of archive of radical thought, and I would say radical tradition, sure. And I'd say there's two people I'd want to highlight. One is he was my teacher for a minute when I was in graduate school at Cal, Berkeley. But Robert Allen wrote this.
Listen, I'm reading it right now.
Classic book, Black Awakening in Capitalist America. I keep coming back to that
Mind
book.
blowing.
Okay, so Robert Allen mapped this thing out because he's writing as a Black scholar, a Black journalist who's accountable to a movement in the 1970s, and I'm really kind of following his lead in a major part of this book that I just did, right? Because what I'm obsessed with is this period that has followed the nominal and official end of U.S. apartheid, the series of juridical and other kinds of, corporate and cultural, other kinds of reform that are premised on this narrative of progress, of national, racial, liberal progress, and so forth and so on. And so what I follow with Robert Allen is the planning that goes on among the architects of the nation state and of this kind of convergence, this general symbiosis between, kind of a white philanthropic owning class, corporate owning class, et cetera, and a white supremacist anti-Black colonial state, which will never not be that, right? It will never not be that. And so following Robert Allen, what you see is that part of the plan was like, okay, so our shit is too brittle. We can't keep it classically white supremacist forever, because all that does is provoke a lot of rebellion, and all this kind of. So we might need to be a little bit more plastic, right, rather than glass, right. So there's a kind of flexing that happens, and that's when you see the sophisticated, layered forms of repression that come on board. First of all, clearly, is the militarized state repression of the movements. Okay, so you still have people who are unrecognized political prisoners, the Puerto Rican independentistas. We could go all the way on down the line. So you have that for sure. That's the kind of the most spectacular and violent and direct forms of political repression. All the while, there is an ongoing, to this very day, right, ongoing planning, a coordination between people who are essentially running philanthropic organizations, think tank organizations, the police, the state, and all that. And they're all tied into a network with each other, right? That's what 501c3 nonprofit status means.
And that's one of the questions that I actually wanted to ask you. What do you think came first? It's one of those chicken and the egg questions, right? Do you think that it was the need for tougher communal policing, or do you think that it was the need to profit from tougher communal policing that spawned this whole this whole movement, for lack of a better description?
Well, I would say profit. When we're talking about the waging of domestic war, including the soft forms of warfare and repression that I'm trying to talk about here, as in addition to policing, the hard repression of policing, I don't think profit is necessarily the imperative. Right. This is not to say that racial capitalism is not always the shit that is running our lives and fucking with us all the time. Right. So I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that the regime of domestic warfare does not necessarily need to be profitable, right? And we see this over and over again. Elected officials, think tanks, foundations, they're willing to invest lots and lots and lots of money.
Millions of dollars.
Billions, my friend. Billions and billions of dollars all the time to figure out how to engage in basically counterinsurgency. So that's what really. So what Robert Allen starts off with in Black Awakening, in the book Black Awakening Capitalist America, is a mapping of these early stages of what becomes a kind of protracted counterinsurgency that we are inhabiting to this day, right? So there's that. The other scholar who I'm indebted to, and who's all over this book, is the great Black Caribbean feminist, artist, theorist, critic of white humanism, Sylvia Wynter. Winter with a Y, y'all. Check her shit out. Read her interviews first, because her shit is so layered and so sophisticated. Like, it's like learning a second language, but it's worth it. It is worth it. And all her shit is on PDF online. Google that
everywhere.
Shit. Yeah. Right. It's worth, just reading her stuff is worth doing a study group around. Right. But part of what I'm taking from Sylvia Wynter's work is how one of the most I think nasty and ingenious forms of planning that this thing called civilization did. Civilization with a capital C, right? Civilization is the thing that created the transatlantic trade, colonialism, manifest destiny, all that shit. That civilization, the half millennium that we're still in. That part of what that did, in significant way through academia, in significant way through art, right? Aesthetics, music, the written word, images, and so forth. Part of what it did was install the Western white human being as the primary compulsory paradigm for all human being, right? So that became the kind of standard through which human being, as a practice. Now, if we think about human being as a verb, let's think about human being as a verb, not as a noun. The practice of human being fits within this particular paradigm right here, right? That's what Wynter talks about, man with a capital M, right? So in my book, I call it white being. And the reason I call it white being is because in addition to what we're talking about with the counterinsurgency that Robert Allen and other people, but Robert Allen principally have wrote about during that time, is we also see a kind of expansiveness to the structure of white being that invites non-white people, all right, now invites non-white people in a selective, piecemeal way to participate in that particular practice of human being, right? And it wasn't always like that. It wasn't always like that, not at this scale. And y'all probably, if you looked at it, you saw I think it's the first chapter. One of the best examples that I will always draw from for the rest of my life is what the LAPD has been doing since the federal consent decree came down after the Rampart scandal.
Share with the folks who haven't read it yet. Please.
If any of y'all listening to this, watching this, whatever, look up joinlapd.com.
Ooh.
Joinlapd.com. For almost 20 years now, the LAPD has been intensively engaged in one of the most aggressive, we used to call it affirmative action back in the day, right?
Yeah, right.
One of the most aggressive diversity hiring initiatives in the United States and probably in the overdeveloped world, right? And you can see the cultural symbols, right? The images that they put up there, that they want brown and black women involved with blue uniforms and badges and guns on their side.
Same thing in New York City as well. They've been pushing that hard. Yeah.
And we see this. So this is what I'm talking about. When we talk about white being, we're not just talking about the accoutrements. We're not just talking about, the Lexus and the 3,000 square foot. We're not just talking about that. What we're actually talking about is the operative institutions, the pieces within this thing we call the system. Right? There's a solicitation, an invitation in a kind of selective, piecemeal way for a lot of people who used to be crowded out by apartheid, colonialism, exclusion, sexism, misogyny, transphobia, etc., to actually be engaged with it. And not just when I say piecemeal, they're not just the valets and the cooks, right? Like a lot of these folks, meaning our folks, using the big sense of our folks,
right,
are invited to actually participate in the leadership. That's what the fuck I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that was my whole telos, right? Supposedly that's what I was supposed to do. And
you hit me in the gut with that, man.
Yeah, I just hope that's not what I've done. I don't think it is. I'm pretty sure it's not.
Okay.
Well, bro. Listen, I'm sitting here loaded.
Nah, man. I mean, I'm okay. My question for you is: given everything that you've mentioned, why do you believe that the complete teardown of the system is what's necessary? I want him to verbalize it, because if many people can't tell already, you're part of that abolitionist movement. So I mean, why is the complete teardown the necessity for building a better or much more just and verdant system?
Look, I'm trying to be a good guest. I feel like I'm fucking talking too much.
Nah, man, you good.
Please.
That's why we brought you here.
No, please, brother.
We brought you here to talk, sir.
But no, I mean, I'm being a little facetious because I love talking. But I can give you like a 1 or 2 line answer to your question. Actually,
Don't do it.
And here's why.
Right,
If we take 2 things. One is we really don't have a choice, right? The teardown. Right, the transformation, whatever you want to call it, the revolution, whatever term you want to attach to it. Terms matter, right? But whatever term you want to attach to it, and we can talk about what the difference is between these terms: teardown, abolition, revolution, transformation. We can have a whole seminar on that, right? And I welcome that. I think that's beautiful. It'd be beautiful to do that. Then we're having a whole different conversation. But the reason those things need to be front and center all the time collectively is because we really don't have a choice. What the current kind of national and global system reveals all the time is that it is fundamentally unsustainable, right? The way in which it is capable of reproducing itself, not sustaining, but reproducing itself, has only been through asymmetrical warfare, domestic, global, and otherwise. All right, so that's number one. As far as why abolition, right? The other thing about abolition, the second thing I want to say is, if I take my own analysis seriously, or it's not my analysis, if I take the analysis that I am a student of and a teacher of seriously, which is that all of these logics of state formation, of racial capitalism, of policing, of incarceration, all this stuff, if all of it is guided in some way by a logic of genocide, right? Meaning that that these things identify particular bodies, people, populations, neighborhoods, geographies for social neutralization or liquidation, right? Not necessarily mass slaughter, because that's not necessarily how you can just go read the common United Nations.
Yeah.
But we're talking about like people that are neutralized and humiliated, eviscerated on a targeted large scale. If we take that analysis seriously, then the only thing you do with genocide is abolish it. You don't try to reform it, right? You don't try to tweak it. The only thing you can do with something that is guided by a logic of genocide is abolish it. So what that means then, now don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that we don't have to be engaged in everyday short-term tactical struggle.
Sure.
To try to keep ourselves and people around us, people we love, people we are accountable to, alive, right? So we just have to have an abolitionist analysis of the kinds of reforms we're supporting, because they have to be the kinds of reform that are in the service of genocide casualty management, rather than in the service of actually expanding the operative systems that are driven by the logic of genocide. And that's
Dylan, we need the police. Without the police, then we're just going to be anarchy, and people are going to be running amok, and there'll be lawlessness in the streets. Like, we need the police. How dare you say that we need to tear down the system?
Come on, Dylan, give it to
right.
me.
Well, the lawlessness,
we have to redefine it, right?
Let's be really clear. The lawlessness is already there, right? The lawlessness is already there. It is everywhere, and I don't just mean police violence. I'm talking about the way in which these places we call the streets are organized, the way in which they are selectively developed and underdeveloped, the way in which they are serviced and abandoned by the state, induce what Native American people call auto-genocide. It induces what Native American people have called
auto-genocide.
Is where identified populations that are targeted by domestic war engage in patterns of behavior, right? Routines in which they are destroying each other. This is not new.
Nope.
This is as old as colonialism. This is how transatlantic chattel slavery started. It's the same fucking logic, right?
Listen, man, I was reading The Revolution Will Not Be Funded the other night. I have the PDF copy, and I'm reading your section, and then it goes to Ruth's section, Sister Gilmore, and I'm getting punched in the mouth from both sections because I live in a community where nonprofits are the dominant source of any sort of social care. And it's killing my community. And no one can fucking understand, Dylan, my outrage when these nonprofits come through. And I'm struggling with articulating because, of course, I have a radical revolutionary mindset where I understand that these people are pillaging, but I can't articulate it. Give me your thoughts on that, please.
So here's what I would advise, because I've been struggling with this for almost my entire adult life, meaning the nonprofit structure.
Yes.
All right. So I work at a university. I work at the University of California. There's probably very few institutions that are more responsible for asymmetrical killing than the University of California. It is a fucking warfare machine. Lots of dastardly shit has emerged from my employer.
You trying not to work anymore, Dylan? Is that what you're doing?
You know what?
Set yourself up. Don't come back and put
my employer.
You know what I'm saying?
No, but this is the funny thing. No. Here's the funny thing. Here's the funny thing. This is what I tell other people that are in, especially young people that are earlier in their career in this job. I feel fucking invincible. All right. It's because I'm tied to so many people and communities, both within universities and way beyond universities, that will make so much hell if they come after me because of the shit that I say about them, that I actually feel deeply protected. I felt the same way when I was supporting the Palestinian position, the Palestinian Arab American Studies.
We're going to talk about that, because that was crazy.
I got these crazy death threats and talking about how they should shooting squad and they should blow me away, and they did all that. But so a bunch of my colleagues, actually not coincidentally, my black colleagues got together with me and said, "Hey, are you all right?" I was like, "Yeah, I fucking feel invincible." Because they're gonna have to go through 3,000 people before they even get to me.
Facts.
You know what I mean? So there's that. Anyway, my point is this about the nonprofit thing.
Please.
The problem is not so much that they exist, just like the problem is not so much that the university exists. The problem is that people don't recognize them as arenas of struggle. Okay, they are oftentimes just taken for granted, and that's the argument that I tried to make in that old article I wrote a long time ago for that book you just read, Revolution, which is that the thing that slips by, and this is what Robert Allen was writing about, is that these nonprofits, they're not just service providers, they're actually forming political ideology.
Yeah.
Right, they're building a set of political assumptions that then circulate to grassroots movements. To churches, synagogues, you know what I mean, mosques, all kinds.
And later, ultimately becoming policy in some instances too.
That's
the ultimate goal. Yeah,
right. Probably the biggest pain in the ass whose name a lot of our folks probably don't identify but should is the paradigm that was constructed by Saul Alinsky.
Yes.
Right. Saul Alinsky. So Saul Alinsky, a lot of his model, which was this, he wrote this famous book called Rules for Radicals, which is a fucking oxymoron.
Radical, bro.
Fucking oxymoron.
Anyway, go ahead, Dylan. Go ahead.
The whole concept that he was building, the whole paradigm he was building was in my interpretation, many people's interpretation, it was a direct political disciplining of the revolutionary tendencies of the liberation struggle. Right. It was a kind of white progressive, white left response, or even a reaction to the radical revolutionary and frankly destructive, systemically destructive, and I mean destructive in the beautiful way, the good way. Right? That bad shit is going to be destroyed. White supremacy, anti-black is going to be destroyed. It's a lot of his paradigm was a response to that, and the nonprofit industrial complex goes with it. At best, right? In the sense that there's always a demand and impulse for winnable victories. There's always a need to declare some kind of victory. And here's the thing, man. You look at the archive of revolutionary black liberation struggle, abolition struggle, anti-colonial struggle all over the world. They give a fuck about winnable victories.
Nope.
There was a sense of humility. There is I should say is. People who are engaged in this kind of work now, feel the same thing. There is a sense of humility that the thing we're going to call victory might be on the other side of mine in your lifetime, but it also might not be.
Yep.
But it also might not be, right? And so part of the humility is not just knowing that that the time to declare victory might not be about you, right? So get over the collective narcissism, the generational narcissism.
There's a bigger picture.
Get over that shit. But part of the humility is also being prepared to understand your collective limitations if the moment actually arrives when that kind of transformation, overturning, revolution, abolition is possible. All right. And I think it's completely the case that we're in a moment like that right now. Right now. We're in a moment where there's abolitionist, revolutionary, transformative possibility right now.
Right now.
And that's why there's this scramble over bullshit. Right. That's why you have the Van Joneses of the world doing their thing. That's why you have the separation within
Black Lives Matter. Yep.
Right. You have the Declaration of Autonomy from all these from all the local organizations,
all the chapters.
Like, we're going to leave behind the Global Foundation thing, and we're going to go do our thing. It just happened right here where I live in Inland Empire, Southern California.
They did the same thing here in Philly.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know if that was making sense, but
you made perfect sense. You made perfect sense. So some people might hear what you're saying, and I want you to clarify because I don't interpret it that way. But some people might hear what you're saying and look at it as being pessimistic. King has that famous quote that the moral arc of the history bends towards justice. I don't know necessarily if that's always the case, but some might hear what you're saying and take it as a pessimistic. Do you take that as accurate? Are you being a pessimist, Dylan?
I don't think so. I think I am. I am when I. No, I think I'm being very skeptical and suspicious. I would say that. I don't know that I would call I have my pessimistic moments because I'm a fucking human being. So let me say that, right? Let me just be out there with that. I think that's okay. Hey, this is no different than what I think. I think I was talking about this on the Beyond Prisons podcast that you listened to a while back, or maybe it was somewhere else. But I was talking about the revenge impulse, right? Yes. A lot of people, a lot of families, especially, right, who have their loved ones killed by the police, right? That the justice movements that form around those folks are driven by a need for fucking revenge, right? And there's this interesting tension.
Oh man.
Debate within left progressive abolitionist radical communities about whether or not to fuck with that revenge impulse, right?
I think you should. I think we should.
I think you have to
have the discussion at least.
And I think the thing is that there's a humility in that, because the revenge impulse doesn't fall into whatever formulaic thing people want to put out there about abolition, right? Because the whole point of abolition is that you want to stop punishment, right? You want to stop, you want to end a so-called justice system that's actually driven by the state's punitive revenge implementations, right? So you want to actually stop that, but at the same time, this is another kind of revenge. This is revenge that's actually grounded, I would say, more fundamentally in accountability, a rage over the lack of accountability, and what now the word that people are using more and more in relation to the so-called George Floyd bill is police impunity. Right, it's a response to police impunity. That's what it really is. I don't even know that revenge is really the right thing. I think so people funnel into, and that's why they say prosecute the cops.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And my thing is like to be in dialogue with that is to say, like, let me honor what you are feeling when you say jail killer cops, right? But it's a big debate. It's like but let's also be honest with ourselves that if there was some kind of prosecutorial miracle and the DA pursued charges and they fucking convicted that person or those cops, those individual cops, it actually doesn't fix any of the problems that led to this loved one's death.
It's a battle.
It's a battle.
It's a battle.
Do you think that with these grassroots movements that surround these incidences of police killings and so on, that there's a way to effectively honor these people, effectively push the message forward, and not allow the outer structure to co-opt the message? Because it seems like that happens far too often.
Yeah. It happens if we take the work of collective, perpetual, rigorous, studied analysis seriously. And the problem is, in many places, organizers and organizations simply do not. Right? That there's a desire for a platform, right? I mean, that's part of what this what was it called? I always think about 8 to Abolition, right? The hashtag 8 to Abolition, which is response to the other one,
to the trash one. Sure.
Yeah. So but that's so part of. But if you read them alongside, they're actually not even analogous to each other, because 8 to Abolition is so deeply radical and aspirational that it doesn't even fit. It's not even congruent with that other one, right? Which the one that will not be named, the 8-point platform that will not be named.
Yeah.
So I think when I say analysis, what I'm talking about is the kind of scrutiny that you are describing, which is constant, right? The gestures of co-optation are constant. I was just thinking about this recently in the context of my university, meaning the University of California statewide, not just UC Riverside, but all the University of Californias, where the administrative response to this whole last 12 months of struggle, as well as the last decade of resistance to police violence on campuses, has been for administration to implement task forces.
Yeah, tuck their head in the sand and then do all that other.
Look, in part of the task force, if they're smart, what they do is they try to reach out to Black Student Union. Right? They try to reach out to people who might be the ones who call themselves abolitionists. They try to reach out to student affairs. They reach out to the cop. Right? They reach out to the chief of police on campus. And they get them all in the room, right? And then what does here's the problem. The struggle then becomes, what should the content be of the recommendations we produce as a task force, right? That becomes the ground of debate. And here's the point. It doesn't matter. Because the purpose of these task forces, and you can draw the comparison out to other kinds of review boards, task forces everywhere, not just at universities, but in cities and neighborhoods. The point of those task forces, in almost every instance, unless they are completely autonomous from the administration in the state, which they almost never are, the point of those task forces is to simply exist as task forces. It's a ritualized ceremony. That's what it is. They do what they do. They can issue whatever horrible, lukewarm, badass recommendations they want. We all know they're not binding, right? We all know that they are never implemented, especially the radical recommendations. They're never fucking implemented. There's always a reason they don't get implemented. But that's not even the point. The point is that there's a performance of administrative self-reflection that then wins back, at least in their minds, it wins back the credibility and legitimacy of the police presence. Which is why I'm involved with this statewide and now national Cops Off Campus campaign. Because we're trying to start by just abolishing police presence at campuses. There's no reason for it.
Fascinating. That's fascinating.
There's no reason for it. So I'm not a pessimist. I'm not a pessimist.
I can listen. I love that, because that will be my response to Sean every fucking time he calls me a pessimist.
You are a pessimist. Like don't let
I am just
response does not wash on you, my guy.
Look, if you're a pessimist, it means you're not involved in community. You're not building struggle alongside people. I'm sorry. I know some people who identify as Afro-pessimists are going to be mad at me about that, so that's okay.
No,
my own interpretation of the term, right? Like there's a certain way that the notion, if pessimism is really deeply what you are, it's real. I should be more fair. It's very difficult to believe in the kind of creativity and the beauty of that kind of collective work, right? Because that shit is profoundly, radically hopeful, and not in the Obama hope kind of way, right? I'm talking about the radical revolutionary abolitionist hope kind of way. That's what I mean. That's the kind of hope that gets you moving with people and thinking and doing things that you couldn't do by yourself. So in that way, fundamentally, I'm nowhere close to being a pessimist that way.
Okay.
I love having guests that say shit that I don't have to fucking say. I can just sit back and be quiet.
That way, all the hate mail doesn't come into your inbox. How do you exist within academia then? Because for so long we've been seeing this fluffy talk in academia about how, anti-blackness exists and how this exists in the revolution and all this other stuff. But for a long time, we've been seeing these institutions continue to perpetuate this foolishness. How do you exist on the same plane with those things? Because it wasn't until this whole George Floyd thing that I saw a lot of universities vocally come out against police abuse, all of that.
Anti-racist policies.
Right.
Oh my God! And like statements of condemnation over anti-black.
Right. All of a sudden, the school's Instagram page is black for whatever. I'm like, come on, my guy. Like, how do you exist within that same realm? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No. Well, I'll say two things. One is that the thing we call the academy or academia, it's not actually a real thing. It's an abstraction. It's really a colonial white supremacist abstraction. It's not a place. You know what I'm saying? Academia is not a place.
Right.
It's an aspiration. It's an aspiration, and that's what's so fucked up and toxifying and colonial about it is that people who have day jobs in places that get named as academic places get toxified by the aspiration. Right? By the aspiration.
Say that one more time, my guy. Say that one more time.
Academia is not a place. It is not a building. It is not really a geography. It is a white supremacist, colonial, and fundamentally anti-black aspiration from its roots, right? You can trace where that term has come from and how it's become institutionalized. That is fundamentally what it is. It is aspirational, right? So the dream is to become a part of this academy, to be recognized by this thing called the academy. Have a capital A academic in front of your name. So that's why I respect when people use the term academic as a pejorative.
Is that why you don't like to be called Professor Rodriguez?
I don't know. Well, look. Partly it might be an age thing, because I think we're probably in the general vicinity of being.
Nah, he older than you, Dylan. Don't worry about it. That motherfucker older than you, bro. Don't do that shit.
He's hopping the graves.
When I see you in these streets.
It really has nothing to do with age. No, I let as I've gotten, it has to do with my age, right? As I've gotten older, I let undergraduate students, they call me Professor Dylan.
Okay.
Right. So I can take that. I can accept that. Right. But, I tell them to call me by my first name. If they want to call me Professor Dylan, that's okay. Because there's a kind of like intimacy to it. So anyway, I just don't really subscribe. I am most flattered when people tell me after they've known me for a couple months that they had no idea what I did for a living. Right. Because that's really flattering to me. It's like, you don't look like a professor. I'm like, thank you. I appreciate that. You know what I mean? But it's like, it's not just that I don't look like one, it's I kind of don't act like one in most cases. Like one in common everyday interaction and whatnot. So that's what I would say about this thing called the academy. Now I do have a day job, right? And so I think part of what has allowed me and others to survive is to treat it that way, that the university, the college, right, that these are day jobs, which means a couple things. One is that in order to sustain your position in your employment, if you're interested in that, right, you have to try to build community and power with other people who are in a similar or close by situation with you, either in that institution or elsewhere, right? So it's another way of saying that universities and colleges, they're no less arenas of collective struggle, of collective resistance, community building, and for that matter, of collective insurgency and revolt than any other institution. Any other institution. And the moment that people think
collective
about
insurgency, that's some strong terminology, my guy.
But look at the history. Look at the history of revolutionary movements, right? There's a good number of
colleges, universities,
where that shit, it may or may not have started at colleges and universities, but there's so many instances in which what happened when students, faculty, and others from outside the university seized that site as a place of struggle to push forward.
Facts. I can see that.
Yeah, and here's why. There's a reason for it. It's because these are places that are they are centers of ideological, political, and epistemological power, domination, of domination, right? So there's a sensitivity around these places that escapes most folks, because they think it's just a bunch of folks that are locked up in their offices writing things. Like, they're doing that too, but there is hardcore research and pedagogy and ideological training that happens at these sites that is inseparable from the hardcore militarized violence that we protest all the time. Right. Hey, look, whether it's the Dakota Access Pipeline, whether it's the oil companies off the coast of West Africa, all these places are inseparable from the research, the pedagogy, the ideological work that happens at universities, which also then means that there's an obligation for those of us that have day jobs in these places to constantly revolt against it in whatever way it's possible, in whatever way we can do it collectively. So that's the mode of survival, is that you have to do the opposite of what kind of people that are really invested in the professionalization kind of routines will tell you, which is to keep your head down. You know what I mean? To not get involved in collective activist work. Let me tell you, that shit does not protect you.
It can't.
Right. In fact, administrations and the right wing, they know who to pick off now, right? They will find the people who are trying to keep their heads down because they presume that they're not connected to communities of people that have their back, and they will try to pick them off, or they'll try to actually turn them. Right. And so this shit happens all the time. The other thing is that the way in which you exist at a day job like this, it's not like you can escape it as being part of who and what you actually are. Right. And what I mean by that is all the colleagues who I came into this profession with around the same time, who swore that they were going to become more outspoken, more principled, more collective, and more activist after they got tenure. Right. Not one did. Not one did, because it just becomes who you are. And then you kind of don't know how to be. It's hard. It's hard to
too deep.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a day job.
It goes back to what you were mentioning when we were talking about the nonprofit industrial complex. These folks who have radical ideologies hook up with these nonprofits thinking that they're going to actually change their communities and end up getting sucked in. The pay is kind of decent, and you become part of the system, working on taking care of symptoms and not addressing the root.
So here's
the bare minimum.
Yeah. So here's the point that I was that I was starting to get at earlier. Just like I'm talking for these last 5 minutes about universities, colleges, campuses, these institutions as sites of struggle, sites of collective revolt, sites of radical and abolitionist insurgency. What I will say, here's why I'm not a pessimist. There are more and more people who I would literally trust with my life, who are turning the nonprofit industrial complex into a legitimate arena of struggle, who are not taking the bullshit, who are not accepting these kind of liberal philanthropic paradigms as the horizon of political thought, as the horizon of political aspiration, who are actually engaged in these places as sites of struggle. Right? So I think that's entirely fine. There's nothing about the nonprofit industrial complex that is automatic, right? No. It's just that I think it's been underanalyzed and underengaged. But I think there's more and more the people that I trust that are finding their way into these spaces and are accumulating kind of networks of community, grounding in collective forms of struggle and
so it is possible.
Yeah, no, you have
It's definitely possible.
You have to believe that shit's possible.
It's struggle.
Yeah. I want to believe it's possible. Yeah,
it's struggle. No, but the point of it is that, and this is one thing that I was in some ways lucky and other ways privileged to get away with. We all got to have a fucking exit strategy.
All of us. Right.
Especially the friends of mine that are in the nonprofit industrial complex waging this kind of struggle. Every single one of them has an exit strategy.
You better.
Right. Because, there is no presumption that this place is going to keep me on board the more I engage in the struggle. But the funny thing about that exit strategy is that part of all this struggle, part of all this movement, part of all this building means that when people exit, they can go find their friend, their homie over there who has a spot for them. And then you start to build these little centers of power, and then some interesting shit kind of happens.
Yeah. All right. We've occupied a lot of your time tonight, man, but I want to make sure before we let you go, we try to get words of wisdom from people of your ilk, people that are in the struggle, people that are mind molders and the whole bit.
Ilk?
Yeah, man. Listen, man. You know how it gets when you got smart people on.
Look, I told you to try the dictionary app. You didn't have to download it.
Yeah, you know he be on some phone.
You didn't have to download that.
Every now and
you didn't have to download it.
It's that
you bought the app, didn't you? He bought the app. He bought
plaid do-rag he has on.
When I see you guys in these streets.
It's so much love.
When I see you in these streets. But anyway, like I was saying, as someone who is a molder of minds, how do you continue with the struggle in and of itself and not get wrapped up in all of the foolishness? Because I know it has to be difficult balancing what's burning inside you and then also being able to do your job, I guess, productively, for lack of a better description.
Is everyone trying to make you compromise every second of the day?
Shit, almost everyone, yeah. I mean, almost everyone. I mean,
some motherfuckers ain't.
Well, part of it is It depends what you mean by compromise, right? Because so the way I took what you mean is a sellout, right? So like, there's a sellout. The tendency towards sellout happens all the time.
They're trying to find the middle ground with you.
Yeah, no, that's all fucked up. I mean, there's other stuff. There's another way of thinking about the term compromise, where it's like it's involuntary, right? Like we are born in conditions not of our choosing, so there's shit that we are fucking surrendering and compromising all the time, like fucking dignity. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like fucking respect. So but I'm taking what you're saying as meaning the sellout. But I'll say that part of it is taking what my dear teacher and mentor from my undergraduate years at Cornell University in Africana Studies, Dr. James Turner, one of the founders of Africana Studies.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And when I was getting ready to leave Cornell, we sat in his office like we had many times before. And I asked him the same question, right? I asked him the same question because, here was somebody who had built this up over many years, who had faced down anti-Blackness and they burned Africana Studies down, I think in its second or third year of existence, going down the line. And I asked him the same question, right? And he gave me two layers of response. One I understood quickly. The other one took me about 10 years to get my head around because I realized he was being literal.
Wow.
Right. The one I got my head around quickly was, he said, well, I surround myself with people who support me. Right. He said, I don't feel like I am obligated to put myself in a room all the time with my fucking critics. Right. Which is an important statement for motherfuckers that are raised in a model minority mentality like me. Hey, look, model minority is not just not just for those Asian people. It's also for the dirty brown Asian people like me, and it's also for all those other non-white people. That model minority thing is all fucked up. So like for him to say that was like, oh fuck, that's liberating as hell. Right now, I don't have to do this whole weird model minority Catholic bullshit of being in the room with people who fucking hate my guts and are always going to challenge my shit. Right? So he's basically like be in community with people who care about you, right? Like love you, who support you. I was like, okay, that's deep. Okay, so the fact that he said it out loud was deep. Okay, that was the one thing I got that. I sort of got that, and I still do. The second thing, and this is the one that is the direct response to your question about the words of wisdom thing. He told me, I have all the faith in the world that you will not get picked off, because, and the reason for that is because I have every faith that you will think of yourself as an intellectual guerrilla fighter. he said an intellectual guerrilla fighter. And then he went on and elaborated that shit, right? And I was kind of in I don't know, in awe of what he was saying, not because it was directed at me, but just because the concept of it was so
very powerful shit.
Was so massive. Yeah, like I couldn't comprehend.
There's a lot of weight on that, my guy.
I couldn't comprehend it. So it took me. Now I'll tell you though, it took me probably about 10 years. Yeah, probably about 10 years to realize that Dr. Turner was making a literal statement. He was not drawing some kind of metaphor or analogy to guerrilla warfare. That Dr. Turner was telling me in no uncertain terms, this is a condition of war, right? Everybody that is engaged in liberation struggle or some form of it within this war must identify a role that they can fulfill, right? And in every instance, it is some version. The language we can use around it for now is guerrilla war, right? Like we can talk about what guerrilla war is, but it's usually waged by the side or the sides that are not armed with the tanks, with the helicopters, and with
yes, indeed,
right. It's a side that is militarily weaker, but might be stronger of will. Right, might outnumber the other side, and might also be stronger in the sense of its collective sense, is its collective accountability to each other. Right, the thing that Che always talks about love. Right, how the guerrilla by love. So to say that is to say then that if I'm taking my own analysis seriously, that the condition is domestic warfare, that the ongoing half century of what I'm calling white reconstruction is counterinsurgency. Then the freedom struggle, the abolitionist struggle, is a guerrilla struggle, and that means that a guerrilla struggle means that there are as many fronts in that struggle as you can identify. Right. So I feel like I have a particular humble, small role to play in that ongoing guerrilla war that Dr. Turner identified for me when I was 21 years old. Right, and that's why I'm in this room with you. Right. This is part of the guerrilla war that we are waging. It is ideological struggle. It is an urging to the people that are with us or want to be with us to do the work. And this is the piece of advice I'm going to give everybody: to do the work of collective fucking study in whatever form that takes. Right. Like, I don't care. I know y'all just did a show recently where you talked a little bit about what's it called? The Black Judas movie.
Yeah. Judas and the Black Messiah.
Black Messiah. Sorry, yeah, I watched that shit too, right? And and it made me angry and sad and all that shit. The way that it was kind of humanizing the snitch and on and on and on. Especially because the only film that matters to me is that documentary film, The Murder of Fred Hampton, right? That grassroots documentary. So I'm saying when I say collective study, fucking watch a film like that together and hash it out. Like, y'all do it. This is my point. Y'all are actually doing it. That's what programs like this, this kind of community that y'all are building, the people that are listening to the live version now and that are going to listen to the recorded version later. I'm talking, this is actually the kind of collective study I'm talking about. I'm not just talking about where you go in a room and all have read the same book, like an Oprah Winfrey book club. Although it can be that. Yeah. It can be that, but it doesn't have to be that. Right. And you probably are not going to pick the same books Oprah picks. Right. Nope. You might, and this is part of that same program. You talked about No Names Book Club. I would advocate you go look at No Names books. Go look at No Names Book Club. Read that shit. Read the stuff that she's putting out there. So I think the one concrete thing that everybody can engage in some kind of way is this form of collective study, because that's how we will collectively develop the kind of shared, rigorous, stubborn, principled, and radical analysis that will stop the onslaught of counterinsurgent bullshit, right? Because that is as dangerous in many ways as the violent, repressive police repression that folks are trying to reform all the fucking time, right? So we got to identify the different fronts of the counterinsurgency and take what Professor Turner was saying about guerrilla warfare seriously and engage with it in humble ways, but in collective ways and in proud ways.
Right? Powerful shit, man.
Unapologetic ways.
Please.
Dylan Rodriguez, we have.
When you coming back, bro?
I'll come back anytime you invite me.
Please.
We have slowly but surely become the home for intellectuals, Black intellectuals. And I'm going to put it, I mean, I don't want to say this too lofty, but at the same time, you're probably one of the baddest intellectuals we've had on the show. I can't say thank you enough, man. Only thing that I ask is the next time that you're in the area, that you bring some of that lumpia.
I'm gonna hook that up.
Yes, indeed. Yes, Dylan Rodriguez. Where can people find you if they'd like to find you, man? How can they get your book? How can they get a hold of you? All of that good stuff.
Hey, hit me up on email, dylanrodriguez73@gmail.com. That's my personal email. Don't be shy. You can find my book. The Fordham University Press website has my book. On Twitter, I think my Twitter name is @DylanRodriguez, right? My Instagram is @DylanRodriguez73. I'm on Facebook. All that shit. But like, hit me up. I want to be in community with as many people as possible. I've got resources to share with people. We're talking about PDFs. I got a shitload of PDFs to email people.
I'm reaching out to you, bro. Don't even worry about it. Say your email one more time.
If you can't afford to buy my book, hit me up. My publisher probably get mad at me, but they can't get too mad. I probably have a PDF that might have some notes on it that I could just email to you. Anyway, what was my email address? It's just my name, Dylan Rodriguez, with a 73 at the end. Yes, that's the year I was born.
At Gmail, right?
At gmail.com.
At gmail.com. No. And what about your IG and all that other stuff, man? Because you're going to get all the hate in your DMs. I just want to let you know that.
That's okay. That shit feeds me. Bring it. Bring it. No, people spend that much time, then I'm just honored with it.
No doubt. So what's your IG and all that, man?
Instagram is @DylanRodriguez73. Twitter is @DylanRodriguez. And then you can just look me up on Facebook. There's not that many Dylan Rodriguez's on Facebook. You'll find me.
Thanks. I see you. Once again, I want to say thank you for coming in, showing up,
I can't wait till next time, man.
Jewels, man. We're going to make sure that you come back.
It was awesome.
Now that I've honored the right person, I want to go ahead and take care of the rest of these guys. Crush, where can people find you if they want to find you, man?
Yeah, you can find me at the Orange Crush with a K or at the SP Methods, aka Bridge, where I will be announcing a new book project.
Okay, no doubt. This motherfucker doing all types of work. Damn.
It's the Jamaican roots.
Be careful.
Hell.
Don't put a root on you.
Hell, where can people find you?
Pause.
Listen, man. Hey, you can find me everywhere, man. At Elgin Bailey. Come through.
No doubt. And I'm Big O, Mr. In the Black himself. You can find me on Twitter and on Instagram at @MR_In the Black. And I want to thank you guys once again for joining us for another incredible episode of the In the Black podcast. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you chose to kick it with us, and we appreciate it. Help to support Black media like this, where we're going to have these open and honest conversations and dialogue back and forth, where we're going to give you the real. We're not going to sugarcoat it for you. So if you like stuff like that, make sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at In the Black PDCST, Cash App, go to the website, all that other stuff. And of course, until next time, informed, intelligent, in the black.
In the Black.
Peace.
Thank you all, man.
No doubt.